to another Magnitude 10. So today we have an interesting topic. Since we're all coming up on a year now of working remotely, working from home, we've had to adjust some of the ways that we work and we communicate with our teams on our projects. And we've been looking at how our colleagues have addressed some of the challenges of what's working, what doesn't work. And one thing that keeps coming up is project management and communication. So we are finding an even greater need for an emphasis on that, and also some support for our colleagues and our staff on how to improve those processes. So what we have been looking at, and I'm sure everybody has heard of different project management processes. For example, there's Sigma 6, there's Lean and Agile project management. And what our Sacramento office has been doing for, I don't know, Tim, I want to say maybe 2 years?
It's probably coming up on 2 years, maybe just shy of that.
Okay. So about 2 years, they've been incorporating Scrum framework into their office organization of teams and development of projects and deliveries. So what Scrum is, it actually originated in Silicon Valley with software engineers. And with software, there are a lot of components that have to be developed in order for others to be able to do their work or continue their work. And this has evolved as being a very effective process in identifying the goals and also being able to find where things get bottlenecked. And by identifying that, we can actually improve the process, bring in more support, and get the project moving along. So I'm going to introduce Tim, who I would say maybe would be Scrum Master. Well, Tim and Leticia, who are Scrum Master. And they're going to go ahead and share with us what Scrum is, how they started with it, what they've learned from it, things to do, things what not to do, and where it's going. And hopefully give us some tips on how we can take some of the concepts and bring them into our own office or our own teams. So I will go ahead and let you guys go.
All right, thank you, Traci.
Thank you, Traci. So I just wanted to go over a quick agenda. Tim is going to jump into kind of a bird's eye view, Scrum 101, just what it is. And then I'll go over our case study with our Sacramento team and now our Northern team. And then we'll jump into some discussion and questions with Traci. If you guys have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat box or you feel free to talk at the end. And we just would really encourage some participation. All right.
All right, I guess I'm taking over. Thank you. So I'm, like Leticia mentioned, I'm going to talk at a high level about what Scrum is and sort of the framework and a little bit of where it comes from. Traci touched on that nicely. It was developed starting in the early to mid 90s, like Traci mentioned, in Silicon Valley. And over time, there have been different Scrum guides put out there by the creators, Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber. And this is a definition that comes from the Scrum Guide that they recently updated in November of 2020. And it says Scrum is a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, organizations generate value through adaptive solutions and for complex problems. And I think you can take a look at what we do and agree that there's some there's a lot of complexity to the way buildings are designed and the systems that are integrated and the teams we work with. And what I want to focus on is that this is a framework, and when you read about Scrum, the Scrum framework, you'll notice that it's intentionally loose, say, not complete, and that's so that the team can build and adapt it to what works well for their team, and generate that value. So moving on to sort of the basics, Scrum 101. And if you've had the opportunity in the past, maybe before we closed our offices, to come through the Sacramento office, you might have seen something like this on our wall. It's a board that we're using, our Scrum board, with 3 areas or 3 columns: the to do, doing, and done. And this tracks sort of the workflow through. And I'll use that through the beginning of this to work through how I'll describe Scrum, starting with theory. So I don't want to spend too much time on Scrum theory. There's a lot of reading out there if you want to, and I can point you to some resources. But I wanted to sort of, in this graphic, show the overall process, and that it's a process, and that there's, if you follow the arrows, the main value generation process down the center, and then from the ends, some loop backs to the beginning of both the product and the process. And so with the values, the team needs to embody these and really buy into the behavior and moving towards that behavior: commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect, and follow that through the process of delivering the work. And then the 3 pillars of Scrum that you might read about are transparency, and that's really more an idea of making the work visible, and making the work visible so that you can uncover constraints that are hidden in there. Maybe if a more siloed process, you can find a bottleneck in just individual work that is in the back of your mind, but other things keep jumping to the front. But if you can get it all displayed out there, you'll keep an eye on that. It's a tool that way. And then inspection and adaptation, when you get to the end of the process and you've created something that you're calling your product that is value, that you take a look at it and make sure that that's what you set out to do, it's achieving the goal. And if it's not, then what do you need to do to correct that? What adaptations do you need to make to either the component pieces that go into that, or the process? And so that's what the 2 arrows sort of on the outside, the loop back arrows in this diagram, represent. The bottom arrow going back to on the product side, and then the top set of arrows going back to how would you adjust the process in sort of this iterative way as work is delivered. And so we'll move the Scrum theory over into the done column, unless there's questions or comments at this point. And seeing none, we'll move roles into the doing column and talk about the different roles in Scrum. And this will be a high level of sort of the 3 different roles that participate, starting with the product owner, which is represented here in the green. The product owner is responsible for creating the entire backlog. So they're responsible for the product. They're going to set the value for the production team. They're going to describe what the end product, what the end product with the component is, and then they're going to identify all of the sub tasks or sub components, the increments that will need to get worked on in order to create that final value. The next role you have is the product development team, which is everyone that participates in creating value. And so they're represented in sort of the reddish orange graphics here. And then the Scrum Master, which would be the 3rd component or 3rd role within Scrum. The Scrum framework is responsible for coaching and guiding the team and keeping them on track to follow the Scrum framework. So the team sets a goal to make sure that they're working towards the goal, and also to ask the questions and make sure constraints are released so that work can flow at an optimal level. And so those are the 3 roles within Scrum. We'll move those over to done, unless there's questions at this point on the 3 roles within Scrum.
Tim, could I ask a question? So say with one of our teams, we have the project engineer, the project manager, then we usually have, supporting engineers and our designer team. Would you say the project manager would be the Scrum Master, the product owner?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, it depends on how the project team is set up and what everyone's doing in any given team. The Scrum Master can really be anyone, and they're really the one that's going to monitor and help the team stay focused on the process and the goals. the product owner really wants to be the one that has the big picture in mind. What is the value that your process is going to deliver? So sort of those roles that you're describing, a project manager, project engineer, designer, you would probably, if you're looking at a specific project, call your project manager your product owner in that respect. Mm-hmm. And the titles really, they describe the three functions maybe of people, or the three different functions within a team. I wouldn't get too hung up on, identifying who that is in any given process. It's something that helps, but maybe is not as critical as taking the steps, and it can change over time.
Oh, thank you.
Good question. If there's no other questions at this point, and there's a little chat box thing. Okay. Then we can move the events over into the doing and talk about the Scrum events. So Scrum is broken up into 5 different events, and these are the things we do within the Scrum framework. Starting with the big sort of central piece in this graphic, the sprint. And some key features of the sprint is that it's a set duration. It's a time boxed event. So usually that would be set anywhere from a week to 4 weeks, a month time frame, depending on sort of the cycle time and how much time you need to complete the task to produce an increment. In certain sectors, it might be as quick as like a day, a couple hours, depending on how quickly you need to turn around those valuable pieces of the work. Within the sprint, there's the daily scrum, which is sort of in the upper right corner of the sprint box. And the daily scrum is sort of where a lot of the work happens that the team will function on. In the daily sprint, you'll meet daily for no more than 15 minutes, trying to keep it to no more than 15 minutes, and really gives everyone the opportunity to answer 3 questions. So you answer, what did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And do I have any constraints? And you announce that to the entire team. And in doing so, bringing sort of that transparency thing into it so that the team can help if you have any constraints. How do we release those constraints? And then so that the Scrum Master can help with that too. It's important that we talk about in that you're just announcing them. You may not be solving them at this point. You may be setting up something separate, but bringing it to everyone's attention that there are some constraints. This process, the sprint, begins on the far left there with sprint planning. And in sprint planning, the product development team, so the team itself, is going to choose from the product backlog what portions of the work they think they can accomplish and are going to commit to accomplish within the set sprint duration. And it's important that it's the team that's deciding, not the product owner or the Scrum Master, but the team collectively agrees to what they can do together. So that's a big important feature. And then moving to the right, the sprint review. So after your sprint is complete, you have an increment of the work that's adding some value. This is a point where the product owner might take a look at it, review something, say, that's what I was expecting. That's not what I was expecting. Maybe we need to make these adjustments. And the team's also taking a look at, how did the process work? Did everything work according to plan? What kind of constraints did we see during our sprint duration? How can we make changes to the process? And I kind of mentioned that earlier. That's the top path that heads to the sprint retrospective. There's many ways to conduct a retrospective, but that's really looking at the process. Leticia will later talk about sort of what the Sacramento team has been doing for retrospectives. And these really describe the 5 events or things that happen within the Scrum framework. So we can move that over to the events over to Don, unless there's questions. No question?
Marina, I have a question for you.
All right. Hey, Marina.
Hey. So my question is on the constraints. And by the way, I love that word because instead of saying problem or something that maybe has a more negative connotation, I just like the fact that you're using that word, and that's from word, I guess. But my question is, so once the constraints are identified, I think you said that the team tries to help, or is that maybe like later on, that's a separate meeting? I guess, when do the constraints get kind of acknowledged to the point where they're actually in the problem solving process and not just the acknowledgement process?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's going to depend a lot on the team or what the type of constraint is. Within a team like the Sacramento team or the Northern team that we've seen, sometimes the constraint is like I'm not able to get a hold of this piece of information from a client or whatever, and I need the project manager to reach out and make that connection and put some pressure on someone to deliver that. In that case, sort of the constraint is identified, and we decide at that time, is it holding up so much of the work that we need to stop right now and address it at that instant, or is it something that we can address immediately following this meeting, or do we need to set up some subsequent constraint relief or problem solving time? But it really is going to depend on how the team is working together and what type of constraint we're talking about. But the idea is that it's resolved before the next check-in meeting, or the next time. You're essentially trying to make sure that the work can still flow forward and not compromise the goal. And that's part of the commitment component, is that we're all committing to a goal, and it's all of our responsibility to make sure that we get there. So the team works to solving that. Did that answer the question, I hope?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any good question. Any others at this point on events? If not, we'll move the artifacts into the doing and talk about artifacts next. So Scrum artifacts within the Scrum framework are the value components. So one of the things that's not on here that maybe should be would be the product itself is the final value piece, which is represented on, maybe it is covered, it's represented on the left as the product backlog. Everything that you know about that needs to get done to complete a final product, that would be consumed somewhere. I'm going to jump a little bit and move over all the way to the right and talk about the increment as an artifact. The increment is every incremental step of value that can be added together to create the product. And so the team's going to decide on how big or what that increment is accomplished, or what it is, with the product owner together. And then the last thing that represents value within the process is the sprint backlog. And so the sprint backlog is pulling from the product backlog chunks of work or value or tasks out of there, and identifying exactly what's going to be accomplished in the given sprint interval that will add up to the increment. And so at the end, the sprint review will deciding, did all of that sprint backlog get accomplished, and is the increment what you had anticipated the increment would be? These are a lot of terms, and so I would suggest maybe, or recommend, not getting too hung up on the terms and just sort of try it out and see how it works. And with that, we can move artifacts to done, unless there's questions on artifacts. No questions. And so then I just want to congratulate everyone on going through a complete sprint cycle in this format on describing the framework. We moved all of our tasks from to doing, or the we would call the sprint backlog, through the doing and to the done. And at each step along the way, we looked at, did we provide the value to this group at the same time? So this is a sort of maybe a small example of the way that Scrum could be applied in a meeting format session.
My turn?
Your turn.
Okay. So I just wanted to jump into a Sacramento case study and hopefully translate everything that Tim just described into how exactly we apply that to our Sacramento office. So starting when we first started Scrum, I guess I just wanted to kind of touch on, how I see it's benefited us. And I just feel like we are more of a team now than we were before. You know, there's all these pieces to the puzzle, and I feel like it truly helps us put those pieces together. So with that, here's how it started. We had a piece of paper on the wall, and Tim told us one day, you know, write down what you have to do this week on sticky notes. And each sticky note is, well, an artifact, as Tim described. And it represents a task that is 15 minutes to 8 hours long, no more than a day. And so it was very basic, as you can see, like you don't know who was assigned to what. We don't have any names on there. There's no color coordination. It was just a very simple question. What are you working on this week? What do you have to do? And then what are we trying to get done? So that's how it started. And I do want to point out the doing column, how it is a very narrow column. There's only space for one task in that column. So the idea is that you focus on your one task before moving on to the next task. You're not, you know, reviewing shop drawings, answering emails, and also trying to do a side calc for someone else. So it's just one task at a time, focus on it, get it done, and move on to your next task. So that was our very basic introduction of Scrum in our office. Oh, and we started in June 2019. So we're almost 2 years into this. So this is kind of a little bit of what I just described. So our tasks, 15 minutes to 8 hours, and we have our categories: to do, doing, and done. And we started by meeting every day for a daily Scrum check-in. And as Tim mentioned, we answered those 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? And do you have any constraints? So that's how it started. And then as time went on, we, you know, evolved into this bigger Scrum board. We call it a Scrum board. And every person each got their own task, or like a color. And so we got better at identifying our tasks and really being able to kind of see what was coming for the week. And so we got a bigger board. We were getting better at tasking things out. And we also added a retrospective into our whole process. So that is seen there on the bottom right. We had plus deltas. So I'm just going to go to this slide. So our perspective of plus deltas is a reflection of the past sprint. So each sprint that we do is a length of 1 week. So at the end of each sprint, we do our plus deltas and we identify, you know, things that went well and what we'd like to continue, and then deltas, things that we can or should improve on for, you know, future sprints. And then we also started a backlog, and that's where we populate tasks for future sprints, which can be, you know, up to a deadline. We know we have to get these set of tasks done for our 100% CD submittal, but it may not all follow within one sprint. And so that'll be for future sprints that we can pull tasks off of the backlog and into the current to-do category. So this is how it evolved and what we added to it as we went. We didn't start by doing all of this at once. And then here's where we're at today. We have a digital Scrum board now. In Bluebeam, we use our Bluebeam Studio. We have a to-do board, doing and done, as well as a backlog, and we have our plus delta board, all in Bluebeam Studio. So as we all know, Bluebeam's really easy, and we just add in our little text boxes of tasks and everything we have going on. So I just wanted to jump into a little bit of the metrics since we started. So here I have plotted our total number of tasks completed for each sprint that we've done along the way. So this graph starts in June 2019 when we started, and we've been keeping track. And we noticed that we've had a few transitional points since using Scrum. So first we had our implementation, and then we went to working from home. And now we're in a new transition period right now. We've added Reno to our team. So here you can see I just added that those are average number of tasks completed over certain time periods. So when we first started using Scrum, we were getting the hang of it. The first 3 months, we averaged around 47. And then we were able to increase that to an average of about 75 into the new year. And then we transitioned to working remote. And when we made that transition to remote work, we were able to add a few more people to our team, and we started daily Zoom calls. So we still have those 15-minute daily check-ins with our team. We meet on Zoom every morning at 9:30 and make it a quick check-in. And so we've kept up with that process. And so we had a really good average of 150 for a few months. We ramped up, and then we kind of steadied out to an average of 135. And now we are in a new transition with Reno. So we're only about a month into that. So we're still waiting to see. I imagine maybe after a few months, we'll really be able to get an idea of, our progress and with our bigger team now. So I just wanted to touch on, what we've seen as far as improvement and benefits. Using Scrum, we've become more organized, and we truly feel more like as a cohesive team. We're able to prioritize better our projects and specific tasks that need to happen for certain projects. And, it's not you're working for 1 p.m. and then another one trying to finish something else for someone else. We're all working as one team. That transparency that Tim talked about, we're really able to see what's in front of us. And, before we had the board, other people might not know what you had in front of you, but with it, they're able to see, oh yeah, you do have a lot going on, or, there's just that transparency. And then the accountability and ability to focus on your tasks has been better, just because of the transparency. And then once we transition to digital, how it's benefited us, for me, it's always on the screen. We have our laptop screen now, so I always keep the Scrum board up on the screen. And it's much like when we were in the office, the Scrum board was up on the wall where we were always able to see it. So, I just like always keeping it visible, and we're just always able to stay in that Bluebeam Studio session. And it really helps facilitate our remote coordination. And, there's a lot of inter-office coordination happening, and just being able to see, oh, I have this coming up, I should reach out and get that work lined up. We've had more participation since remote work has started. And we've kept up with the consistency, and we still have that visibility. I think a side effect of still continuing our daily Scrum check-ins, we've been able to see each other every morning on the screen, which is nice, just getting some FaceTime with our whole team in our office. And then our latest transition, I've mentioned a few times now, we became the biggest little office in the company. So we have incorporated Reno into our team now, and we are now the northern team. And so with that, we're still new, but, I think we have 13 people on our northern team now. So, with that, we have more resources, and our participation is increasing. And we've actually gotten very efficient at our daily check-ins. Before we had a larger team, sometimes we would have, we'd get off track with our check-ins, and because we had that 15 minutes, maybe we started late or little conversations would happen, but now we're able to really stay on track and know that, like, stick to the point in that 15 minutes that we have in the morning. So since I'd say we're still in this transitional period with our northern team, and we just are, as we adjust to this new team, bigger team, we're just going to examine the process as we go and just have constant check-ins to see how we can improve. And that kind of ties it back to our overall magnitude 10 of Kaizen, change is good. So we just need to, remember that change can be a good thing, and see the benefits of using a new process and of how to stay organized and work as a team. And I just want to follow up with a couple of testimonials. I'm not an infomercial, but we have a few quick words from Adam in our Sacramento office, our wonderful designer. Adam says, without daily Scrum, we would struggle to coordinate project priorities with the full team. Scrum keeps me more productive, and I feel like I get a lot of work done with it. It's a great tool to help everyone feel like they're part of a team while working from home too. Couldn't agree more, Adam, thank you. And then one last testimonial from Mike Campbell in our San Diego office. He spent a short time with our Sacramento office and got to benefit from Scrum. And he said, Scrum transforms my many spinning plates of projects into a neat, manageable stack of dirty dishes I can clean one by one. So I could not think of a better analogy. Thank you, Mike. And so, I mean, I hope with all of this, I don't want to overwhelm people with what we do with our team here, but I do hope that everyone has been able to get a better idea of what Scrum is and how it can benefit your team. So with that, do we have any questions or discussion? And I guess I would like to turn over to Tracy. Yeah.
Thank you, Leticia. I think that was a really good overview on the practical applications of the Scrum framework and how you can actually apply it to, just getting our engineering work done and out the door. So I did have a couple questions. If we could go back to one of the slides with your more advanced Scrum board. So my question is there any guidance or recommendations on how to prioritize tasks, in a sort of hierarchy? Do you try to organize it so the larger, more complex task is done first, or is it completely interchangeable according to what other people need?
Yeah, a great question. So it does largely depend on, if something is due, how big the task is, and if anything can push. A big question we ask a lot is like, can it push if we're overloaded? And Tim, feel free to jump in at any point. Yeah, so that's one of the things that we discuss on, say, our Monday morning planning session. So I didn't really touch on this, but every Monday we have our sprint planning. So that's when we go over what are you doing for the whole week, and everyone has populated what they're doing that week. And we're able to kind of prioritize in terms of how we see our week going. Ideally, like, this is what we're going to do first and, get done along the way. So that's when we have like an overall team conversation of if that planning is going to work, or if we need to reprioritize some of those tasks that we have lined up.
Yeah, and just to add, so like Leticia mentioned, you did a great job explaining, by the way. In the sprint planning, so in our Monday planning session, we're really what we're getting at is everyone's identifying what is it that I'm going to be working on this, or what do I think I'm working on this week, and then with all of the stakeholders and the product owner, sort of being um, the one that's going to set the guiding tone or make the decision on where overall priorities go. We talk about it as a group, and the group's deciding, okay, um, this needs to get started earlier in the week, so that this we can get markups over to designers so that we can have a set of drawings sent out by the end of the week. So we need to do, these beam calcs or this lateral analysis or whatever it is by this point. And so everyone can see the logic and then not, or work towards that logic and not be surprised along the way when you get something that's not what you thought it was because you didn't have the conversation and it wasn't visible. I think also if you asked the team, one of the things that it's helped with is there are things like CAs that are unpredictable in a lot of cases that come in and are quick turnarounds and may be very disruptive to a plan like this. And if in the daily check-in, you're able to bring that up right away, like, hey, I've got to address these three things, and then I can jump back on and still get you what you need by this, whatever your agreed upon date is, or you're alerting someone to like, that's going to come later. How do we work around it? And the team's working to make sure that we're all being efficient and working toward the goal, so that it's all out there. So hopefully that answers like how the priorities go. I would say that they're not set in stone at the beginning, and they're ever changing, and the idea is that they're ever changing with the big picture in mind.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I love it. I love that every team member is involved too, and is involved in the conversation. And then I have one more question. So does it really only take you 15 minutes for your daily scrum?
Yeah. Yeah,
Really? That's
quite
impressive.
mhm.
I'll say that at the beginning we weren't very strict about a time limit, in part because we're trying to learn the process together and make the improvements. But as we got really developed and kind of understood, got into a flow and a rhythm with it, we are really able to hold to the 15 minutes because you're really focused on those three things. What did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And do I have any constraints? And then sort of holding if you have constraints, knowing that, okay, someone's going to help follow up with me later, so that it doesn't have to be a longer meeting for the entire 13 people on the call, but that you can focus that attention where it needs to go. And then there's, sorry, hopefully that answered. There's a question in the chat that Adam answered, but we should probably announce it. Adam, you want to answer that?
He doesn't want
No. Leticia's got it.
No.
So the question was, why are all of our Post-its aligned on the right side in the to-do category? So it was kind of hard to fit on here, but usually our to-do, doing, and done, they're all lined up on one screen. So I cut them in half for just purposes of displaying this, but the priority tasks are on the right-hand side, closest to the doing column, as Adam mentioned. So it just kind of moves over into there and then into the done once we're done. So I guess the to-do category, we read right to left.
Mhm.
Yeah, focus on what's in the doing, right? So focus on getting something done and to where the value has been created and captured. And then the to-do prioritization that way just helps if you were on a wall physically, right? Like you don't have to walk to the end of the wall and bring your next task all the way to doing and shuffle them over. It's a little bit easier in the digital format to just grab a chunk and move them over. It's a lot more difficult when you have to go and stack up your stickies and then redistribute them out. And I would say that's that's not inherent to the framework. It's something that we decided as a group that would help us in our process. So one of the inspection adaptation things that we implemented was sort of this this setup.
I have a question. Leticia, by the way, it's a really nice job. Good presentation. Question I have is the to-do list, like for example, there's some gaps there. Is this like horizontal axis, was it timeline or something?
Do you want to answer that? Or you want me to answer it?
Like you see a red person, you got the 3 on the far right and the 3 gaps and 2 there. What does that mean?
So it's kind of there's not any set instructions to it or method to our madness, but what it has kind of evolved into is that on the right hand side is what we can see ourselves getting done that week. But if we happen to accomplish all of our tasks that we have planned, then we kind of jump into what's on the left side. That's kind of like a personal backlog of, well, if I can get around to it, I'm going to get to these this week as well.
So what is the one on top? And you have some notation. What is it? Is it day or something? What is
that? Those are numbers, just so that we're able to count. Sometimes we count like, oh, what did we plan for this week?
I see. So it's kind of like a personal, everyone have its own kind of organization, some priority there, and it kind of spread out so that each person can remember what's going on that particular week.
Yeah. And sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess a real easy way of putting it too is the stuff on the left is what you can see as it can push if it needs to.
I see. Which one's your color, Leticia?
I am the teal right here in the middle.
I see. Let's say that you task this out on Monday morning, right? So you spend what, half an hour to kind of task out that week? Is that what you do before 9:30 meeting?
Yep.
And so you know what to do. So you kind of task this out yourself. 15 minutes max, minimum 8 hours maximum.
Yeah.
Task it out, and you kind of put up there. And let's say in a week, you have to do all this thing, but suddenly you found out you cannot do it because you got some doctor's appointment suddenly happen. You have to go, or something is construction administration happen, right? Then you got a task, you can do it. Can you move the task to someone else? Say, hey, could you do this? Put up there. How's that works?
Yeah, if there's something, that absolutely can't push and needs to get done, that's, the discussions we have on our daily check-ins. And if we really need to allocate tasks to other people.
Daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first 15 minutes meeting. Say, hey, Adam. So Adam is a red. So he said he's gonna do some stuff. He only got the four things to do, each of only 20 minutes each. Say, hey, Adam, maybe you can do this for me. Is that how do things like that?
Yeah, and a lot of that happens too during CAs, like Tim said, because things come in. So if you can, peel off an R5 for someone else to do, that's an easy one to break off.
I see. Now you can do it during the daytime, right? Since this is just, you can go there, kind of change it. Say, hey, you can tell someone, say, Adam, could you take this? And you just put it back. That kind of stuff like that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of negotiation kit doesn't necessarily have to happen as the group, but the group has to agree that it's not going to be detrimental to the overall week goal. So usually when you get overloaded with like CA questions, it's something that we all agree that we need to be responsive, to keep projects moving forward. And so we look for the opportunities to juggle that. And maybe that's a project with a longer schedule something can slide out a little bit and someone can help the day of, or maybe they completed something sooner than they were anticipating and they have a little gap that they can fit something in. But it's a constant. So we're looking at that constantly to find out where those opportunities occur. And the group is agreeing to do it that way.
So it's every minute changing, right? You got to-do list I put up, but I'm doing this one task. I move to doing column. Then when I finish my task, move to down column. And everyone can see it, the whole sequence of event in real time, in a sense.
Yeah, as real time as we can make the updates. But yes, that's exactly it.
That's cool. So this is like a really, I'm speaking of transparency. It's like used to, or therefore even now, too many people say project management team running, right? So one project manager and let's say 5 people working on one project, many of the tasks is kind of hidden into one project manager's head, right? The project manager kind of knows what's happening or whatever, right? But each person don't know what other people are doing it. It's like a hidden in a sense. But this way, everything kind of open up from not only one brain, but just kind of shared by visually to the every project team essentially.
Right.
That's what the whole thing's here, right? So essentially, kind of empowerment of the each member, in a sense.
Right. It's gonna
Information to be shared.
correct. Empower each team member to take a look at what they're planning on accomplishing in the week, making sure that they're going to go out and look for where am I going to get hung up, what are my constraints, so that the flow works, and also talking about it gives you the opportunity to get input. You may be talking about a specific task that's unique and you may not have done it before, but in talking about it, someone on the team may say, hey, I've done that before. Maybe you should talk to Casey or Lon or whatever it is. And then so we can connect sort of those items together so that you can get feedback. Whereas you might be, trying to research it on your own if you didn't know that expertise existed.
What is the maximum people you can put in there? This is more like a project management too, right? In a sense.
Yeah, that's a good question. And Leticia, sorry for jumping in. I'll take that one if you want. The process starts to get clunky and break down when you get to about where we are now at over 11 or 12, because you just have too many different people and the increments get too big to manage it in this format. So when you read about the framework, it talks about the minimum team size being 3, the optimum team size being between 7 and 9, and then once you get over 11, you're sort of pushing the limits of what works or what can be really efficient. So that's sort of the ranges. The framework itself originated as a single project framework. So working on a single project towards one common goal. So in our case, it would be one project. We know that we don't work that way. We work on multiple projects. Even individuals work on multiple projects. It's very rare that one person's assigned to one project and spends their entire 40 hours on the same project at any given time. So we've sort of adapted it to be an overall team workflow where we have multiple project deadlines, multiple project deliverables that are being tracked and worked towards as our goal. So whereas if it were a one project sort of scenario or team that we were setting up, our goal may look like, completing the lateral design drawings or something that might be our increment. Whereas with the full team and multiple projects, we have, breaking it to multiple projects, sort of, it's this project at this milestone, this project, this milestone, progress on this project would be our increment goals that we're testing against. So sort of that's an adaptation we've made. We've tried it on a smaller scale with individual project teams. It just became, because we were doing it so many times, difficult to have additional sort of subgroups doing it. But if there were a large project, it might make a lot of sense to do that. I think our project was just too small.
So if you got like a team of or office of say 20 people, how you break it 10-10, just arbitrarily?
Yeah, I think you would want to study the work in the office and see kind of how the teams form. And to be fair, when we started, we didn't. Not everyone was involved initially. It was sort of as this process made your individual workflow more valuable. People joined in. It was open. And so in starting something new, I would suggest doing that same thing. It's a little bit of a different change to the way you think about the work. But as we've seen, I think it's made a big difference for us on the positive side.
So if you got 20 people in there, you got to say 5 projects going on simultaneously, and some people on maybe multiple projects, right? So you have like 3 different boards going on simultaneously?
Yeah, I think that it would depend on how those get broken up. But if you had a large group, 20, 25 people, or pick a number, and you have a handful, a dozen projects or whatever coming in.
Yeah, project-based management.
You could do it based on the project, or you could do it based on the team, and you might want to look at sort of the commonalities between who's sharing the work. You want your team to be working around or sort of assigned to working on the same block of work, even if it's different projects, right? And so within the Sacramento office or the Northern team, it's mostly work that we're doing internally, or that if it is sort of in the way we're set up, a cross office function, that there is someone that's responsible for that on the team that can speak to the priorities of it. That's in this team speaking for it. So that's pretty key. If you have to, in your daily 15-minute check-in, say, I'm constrained on this thing, but I have to go outside of the team to be able to release that constraint, that starts not to function. So that's why you really do need someone responsible for being able to prioritize on the team itself.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim, how big is the task, that we want to put it on this, the to-do list?
That's a good question, and it's something that an individual team will want to work out on what makes sense. You want the task to be something that, when completed, captures some amount of value that you can set it aside and stack it on to the next sort of thing. We decided early on, or maybe I decided early on, that our task, in terms of relating it to duration, should be something that was longer than 15 minutes, so that it made sense to spend the time to write it out and think about it, and not more than a day, because at the end of the day, you're going to put it down and then have to come back to it the next day, or have to come back to an inbox full of email or phone calls or whatever. So that those are sort of the increments that we thought worked well, and that's what we've kept it to so far, and we haven't really seen a big need to change it from there. Does that answer your question, Charles?
Yes, because I'm thinking about myself. I have so many tasks. So if I'm putting on all this task in here, then it will be like really, there's a lot of tiny tasks.
Yeah.
That I might respond at, even without putting on top of it.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good observation, because I have a similar, I probably have a lot of tasks also that a lot of them don't show up on here. One, not because they are too small or don't, they're less than 15 minutes or larger than a day or anything like that, but more because they're not adding any value to the team, towards the team's goal. So really what shows up is what is going to contribute to the team's goal. So whatever your team is deciding in its given sprint is the goal, those are the types of items that you want to show up as tasks in your sprint backlog or your to-do items, because it really comes down to how is the team going to work efficiently and create the value as a group together. So anywhere where you can see, this thing might be a constraint to someone else, that probably wants to be a task. But if it's something you're doing yourself, it's probably not something that you need to put on there, although you could.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, Tim, I had a couple of questions. So I get them. First one is, so what's the purpose of keeping stuff in the done area instead of just deleting them when you're done?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Wayne. So
because of feeling good.
Yeah, there is a bit of that, the psychological sort of component of moving things to done. If you read about it, they talk about you get a dopamine hit by making things done. It's something that maybe not for everyone, but for some people is a positive reinforcing thing. The other thing, Wayne, is that what you're doing is in your sprint, the time boxed event, you want to try to understand how the team is performing. So, and the only way to do that is to capture what was completed or what's in the done side at the end of that sprint. And not with any intention of saying, hey, this person always only completes 5 things and this person completes 20 things. That's not the intent. The intent is that if you're always individually piecing your work into the same sort of size, increment, complexity, whatever you want to call it, that the average will tend to be where you're looking at. And so tracking the productivity of the team on an average basis is where those numbers start to come in. In sort of the advanced implementations, that's called tracking velocity. And sort of the graph that Leticia, the plot that Leticia had, that was coming from the tally of those done numbers at the end of the sprint, and sort of just seeing the progress. The other reason why that's important to know that number is in sprint planning. If your team is averaging, say, 100 tasks or 100 items in the sprint interval, and all of a sudden, one sprint you have 200 that are in your to-do, it's a check, for the team to say, hey, are we biting off too much in this one chunk? Or are we not biting off enough in one chunk? So for those reasons is why you would keep it in those done tasks in the done column.
All right. Another question was, well, so this process seems like ClickUp is made for this instead of what we're using it for, really. So have we tried using it on ClickUp yet?
That's a good question. I think ClickUp has some built-in features. We've tried it on a small scale with the team to do this. We have not made a huge investment in converting initially because it was another platform to learn, and the team was already pretty functional in this format. But I like where you're going with it. It's something that I think we should take a look at as a next step.
Yeah, I was like thinking because the way we're using ClickUp now is not really, ClickUp's not really designed for the way we use it, and it seems like it's more designed for this situation. So,
yeah,
and that could be, and you're talking about doing the inter-office issues where somebody has to know constraints and stuff with that. I think some of that could be solved through doing it through this platform, doing it through ClickUp instead too.
Yeah, I think those are good points. Something to be investigated in the future. I think definitely to transition to ClickUp is an option that we should look at and could have a lot of efficiency for us.
Yeah, and then what the other one was, so you said the system kind of breaks down when you have a team larger than 11. So what does that mean when it breaks down? Yeah,
so just in terms of the time it takes to plan, and it's set up for a single project, right? And we're sort of adapting it to multiple projects or multiple products in our application. And so when it gets bigger than that, how do you start to have to figure out how do you set the priorities? Is everyone in that group interacting with each other enough to call them one team, right? I think is where the question comes in. And when you get to larger than 11, you usually have some distinct groupings within that could be teams on their own. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out how we could implement that, because I'm just thinking, because some of these, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of things that people aren't interacting with each other, but then there's, then it's kind of not an easy way to break a team apart either in a lot of situations.
Yeah, and I agree. That's kind of why we're at 13 and still working through it. I would say, not that it can't be done. It's just what the practitioners have found is that in their applications, the sort of sweet spot was the 7 to 9-ish number in terms of team members, if that makes sense. I think if you have a larger team, it would still be worth trying and seeing how it goes. And so every team that implements the framework is going to have a different experience and a different sort of setup. You can take sort of what we've talked about as the implementation in Sacramento and use that or not. But the way that each team functions is going to be different. There's different personalities, different understandings, different ways of working that all get expressed in this. And because it's iterative and you're constantly improving, constantly striving to improve the process, it's going to change and be different. Even if you started with, at the same point with two teams, their progression is going to be different.
And Tim, you got 13 people, and as a northern team grow, you can test out, see what would be maximum if it makes sense. Maybe end up to 20 people,
Yeah, we do.
Test it out, keep going there.
I agree, and we do. We're definitely over what the practitioners and the literature would say is the upper limit, and we seem to be still doing pretty well with it. So
there you go. Hey Tim, why don't you you and your team can investigate a ClickUp application for this and kind of figure this out. Then send this platform to everyone. Okay, and just people we can pick it up, start using it.
Yeah, I would say don't. Yeah, I agree, and that's something that we've been investigating. We've tried it with 2 smaller teams. Like I said, it became a little bit cumbersome to do both. The Bluebeam and the ClickUp when we're kind of the same team. So we can definitely do that. I would say, though, in the meantime, don't let that be a deterrent from trying it out in an analog format. My own personal journey started on my own, sort of on my cubicle wall, doing this for just my own work. So there's sort of no lower limit of what you can try to accomplish with it. But certainly as you get teams, it becomes, you need to grow as the team grows.
Yeah, and Tim, I'm wondering about our Sacramento, our northern situation, where I think it's basically maybe over half of our people are PM, PIC level. And maybe that may be why it's working a little better, having so many people in this right now. Or maybe if it's more heavy on the project engineer drafting side, then it may get more cumbersome.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. We haven't really tested it out with a different team, so we're not sure, but it is working pretty well for what we do. And we do have a different sort of maybe mix than some other teams would.
Yeah, are you gonna, will your group be willing to share the Bluebeam PDF that you guys currently use while we're waiting on the ClickUp stuff, just so we can look at it and maybe start playing around with it?
Yeah, we can absolutely make that available to everybody. I think we've probably shared it. Traci, I think we sent it to you once, right? I don't know if it was this version or a different iteration of it, but something. But yeah, I think we can share that. It's currently sort of a live studio, so we might not invite everyone to the live studio session, but we have the template sort of files that we can send around, make available.
And maybe that might be a good way to start testing it for our own groups. Is we'll create a Bluebeam session, invite everyone in our office, and you can join, you can not join, but we'll just start populating our lists. I think currently we already have check-ins or day ahead meetings. So I think it would be a good tool, and we'll see how that evolves.
Yep, that sounds like a good plan.
I just want to point out as well that for people interested in going the ClickUp route, there's plenty of documentation on the website. And I know a lot of people have asked recently about, tutorials for learning ClickUp. So maybe this is something that we could, we could create in the next couple months or so for everyone if there's an interest there. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, why don't we just do that, Zach? So maybe Tim, Zach, you guys can meet up. What would be at the best platform? Just make this up. This is pretty simple stuff, guys, by the way. Then let's just, whatever the final form is, let's send it out to everyone in the whole world. Cool?
Sounds good.
All right. Excellent. I think time's up, Tim.
All right. A little bit over time.
Well,
That's
it was a really good topic. Thank you, Tim and Leticia, for sharing your experience and kind of educating all of us on the process. And thank you everyone else too for joining and showing your interest. I mean, we have a really good group here. So we're looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Guys.
Great job.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.